Hello, and welcome to Code Your English, the space where we not only fine-tune your language skills, but also explore the deeper conversations that shape our lives. I'm really glad you've tuned in today, because this episode is one of those that sits right at the intersection of language learning, self-awareness, and emotional clarity. And if you're someone who's trying to grow in your career, your relationships, or just within yourself, then this topic is going to hit close to home. Today, we're diving into a simple but powerful idea: understanding your needs, wishes, and expectations. Now, at first glance, those words might sound like they belong in a self-help book, or maybe a psychology class, but in reality, they're part of our everyday lives, whether we realize it or not. Every decision you make, every conversation you have, every moment of tension or peace, it all ties back to these three internal forces. And yet, most of us rarely check in with ourselves to really understand what's driving us. So, when was the last time you asked yourself, what do I truly need right now? What am I hoping for? What am I expecting? From myself? From others? From life? It's easy to go through life on autopilot, especially if you're juggling work, family, studies, or any kind of long-term goal. But here's the thing: if you don't slow down and tune in to your internal landscape, it's very possible to get swept up in other people's expectations, or to chase after goals that don't actually meet your real needs. That's where frustration builds up. That's when burnout creeps in. You might find yourself working harder and harder, and still feeling strangely unfulfilled. From a language perspective, understanding these concepts gives you a way to talk about your emotional world with more nuance and precision. It helps you move beyond surface-level vocabulary like "I'm tired" or "I'm fine" and into more expressive, meaningful territory. Phrases like "I'm feeling disconnected," "I wish I could slow down," or "I'm trying to manage expectations." These are the kinds of expressions fluent speakers use all the time, especially when navigating personal or professional challenges. And if your goal is to communicate not just clearly, but authentically, this kind of vocabulary becomes essential. Culturally, too, the way we think about needs, wishes, and expectations varies from place to place. In some societies, talking openly about personal desires or setting boundaries can be seen as selfish, or even taboo. In others, it's encouraged. So this topic also gives us a chance to reflect on how culture shapes our internal dialogue. It invites you to explore what beliefs you've inherited, and which ones you might want to rethink. So as we move through today's episode, I want to invite you to be both a language learner and a life learner. Let yourself be curious, not just about the words and expressions I'll be using, but about what's happening inside you as you listen. You might want to take some notes, or pause to reflect. And if a certain phrase or idea resonates with you, make a mental note of it. There's no need to rush. This isn't about mastering grammar. It's about mastering understanding. By the end of the episode, my hope is that you'll walk away with not just better English, but a clearer sense of your own needs, wishes, and expectations, and how they shape the way you move through the world. So, take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Defining the trio: needs, wishes, expectations. Let's take a moment to pause and unpack these three big words: needs, wishes, and expectations. We use them all the time, often without thinking much about them. They come up in casual conversation, in conflict, in our goals and regrets. But when we stop and really explore what each one means, not just in theory, but in how we live our lives, something interesting starts to happen. Things become clearer. We begin to understand ourselves a little better. So let's start with the most fundamental of the three: needs. A need is something essential, something you quite literally cannot thrive without. And I'm not just talking about food and water, although those are obviously part of it. I'm also talking about emotional and psychological needs. The need to feel safe, the need to feel seen, the need to belong. Needs are like oxygen. You don't always notice them when they're being met, but the moment they're not, it becomes impossible to ignore. When you're constantly exhausted, disconnected, anxious, or on edge, there's a good chance that one of your core needs isn't being acknowledged. And here's the thing: unmet needs don't just go away. They tend to show up in disguise, maybe as irritability, maybe as procrastination, maybe as that vague sense of something's off, even when everything seems fine on the outside. That's why understanding your needs isn't just useful, it's vital. It's the foundation. Without that foundation, everything else becomes unstable, no matter how impressive or successful it looks from the outside. Now, let's move on to wishes. If needs are the oxygen, wishes are like stars. They shine in the distance. They give us direction. And sometimes they even seem out of reach. A wish is something desirable, something you long for, dream about, or imagine. It's not necessarily essential for survival, but it adds beauty, richness, and a sense of possibility to life. You might wish for a change in career. You might wish to travel more, to find love, or to feel more confident in your skin. Wishes speak to the part of us that hopes, the part that looks beyond the present moment and envisions something different. But here's an important distinction. Not every wish becomes a goal. Some wishes are gentle, quiet. Others are loud and persistent. Some stay in our hearts for years, never fully acted on. And that's okay. Wishing is not weakness. In fact, it often reveals what you value most deeply. But when we confuse a wish for a need, we run into trouble. We start to believe, for example, that we need approval, or that we need success in order to feel worthy. That's when things get blurry. That's when it becomes hard to tell what's truly essential and what's simply desired. And finally, let's talk about expectations, which are, in some ways, the most complicated of the three. Expectations aren't just about what you want or need. They're often about what you assume, consciously or unconsciously, should happen. They're shaped by your past experiences, your culture, your upbringing, your relationships. Expectations are like an invisible script running in the background. You may not even realize you're carrying them until reality doesn't match up, and suddenly you feel disappointed, frustrated, or let down. Think about it. Have you ever expected someone to text you back quickly and felt upset when they didn't? Or expected a situation to go smoothly and felt defeated when it didn't? Expectations can sneak in through the back door, shaping our reactions before we've had time to reflect. They're not inherently bad. In fact, they help us plan, prepare, and relate to the world. But they can also become rigid, even unrealistic. And when they do, they become a trap. You start measuring your happiness not by what's real, but by what you assumed should have happened. So to bring it all together, needs are what sustain you. Wishes are what inspire you. Expectations are what you predict, or sometimes demand, from life. The three often overlap, and that's where confusion begins. For example, you might expect appreciation at work. But is that expectation based on a wish, or a deeper need for recognition and respect? Or you might wish to be in a relationship. But is that wish masking a need for emotional safety? Or shaped by social expectations about where you should be at this point in your life? The more you begin to differentiate these elements, the more empowered you become. Because when you know what you truly need, you can prioritize. When you know what you genuinely wish for, you can dream without guilt. And when you recognize your expectations for what they are, not facts, but assumptions, you can meet life with more flexibility and compassion for yourself and for others. And just to highlight something here for your English development, notice how many abstract nouns we've just used: belonging, safety, recognition, disappointment, fulfillment. These are not words you can see or touch, but they name real emotional experiences. They give shape to your inner world. And that's the beauty of learning English at this level. You're not just describing what you do or what you like. You're learning to articulate what you feel, what you hope for, and what you expect. That's powerful. So as we move forward in this episode, I invite you to reflect on this question. Can you identify one current need, one honest wish, and one hidden expectation in your life right now? Don't rush it. Just sit with the question. Sometimes clarity begins not with the answers, but with learning to ask better questions. Needs. What you can't thrive without. Let's go a little deeper now, into the heart of the conversation. If we're going to understand ourselves with more honesty and clarity, we have to begin where everything else begins, with needs. Not the kind you can brush aside or postpone indefinitely, but the ones you carry with you, every day, whether you're aware of them or not. These are the things you can't thrive without. In fact, when your needs go unmet for too long, it's not just your energy that fades. Your sense of motivation, your confidence, your ability to connect with others, all of that begins to unravel. Now, many of you may have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a psychological theory that's often taught in Western educational systems and widely used in personal development discussions. Even if the name is new to you, the concept might feel familiar. Picture a pyramid. At the base of this pyramid are your basic physical needs, things like air, food, water, sleep, shelter. These are non-negotiables. If they're not being met, your mind and body go into survival mode. Above that, you have safety. Not just physical safety, but also financial security, health, and emotional stability. The next levels involve love and belonging, then esteem, and finally, right at the top, something called self-actualization, the deep human drive to become the best version of yourself, whatever that means for you. Now here's what's interesting, and actually quite relevant to the modern world. Many of us today live with our basic needs met. We have a roof over our heads. We have food in the fridge. We're not constantly afraid for our physical safety. And yet, there's this strange feeling of emptiness or dissatisfaction that many people carry, almost silently. That's because while our lower-level needs may be satisfied, our emotional and psychological needs often aren't. And those, too, are critical if we want to live, not just survive. Think about connection. We live in a time where it's never been easier to send a message, share a photo, or start a video call. And yet, despite being constantly connected, so many people feel profoundly alone. Why? Because real connection, the kind that meets your need to feel seen, heard, and understood, can't be replaced by digital interaction alone. The need for emotional intimacy, for deep conversations, for presence, these needs can't be met by scrolling or reacting. They require time, trust, and attention. And when they're not met, even if everything looks fine from the outside, the inner experience can feel hollow or disconnected. Or take the need for recognition. Not in the sense of fame or attention, but in the more human sense, the need to be acknowledged, to feel that your efforts, your struggles, your growth are noticed. In the workplace, for example, when people consistently give their energy but feel invisible, it doesn't take long for burnout to set in. The work may continue, deadlines may still be met, but emotionally, something begins to shut down. This is a perfect example of how unmet emotional needs can affect not just your mood, but your sense of identity and motivation. And sometimes our needs are dismissed by others or even by ourselves. We're taught, often unconsciously, that needing too much makes us weak or needy or selfish. In some cultures, there's even a kind of silent pride in not needing anything. You're praised for being self-sufficient, for handling things on your own. But let's be honest, no one is truly self-sufficient. Humans are inherently social, emotional beings. To need care, affection, affirmation, that's not a flaw. That's part of being alive. It's also important to note that needs aren't static. They shift over time. The needs you had at age 20 may be very different from the ones you feel at 30 or 40. Life circumstances change. You move countries, lose a job, become a parent, face illness, fall in love, grow older. And with those changes, your inner landscape also transforms. Sometimes, needs become more subtle, more complex. You might not even be able to name them right away, but they're still there, showing up in how you react, how you relate, and how you feel at the end of the day. From a language learning perspective, being able to express needs accurately and clearly is more than just useful. It's empowering. Instead of saying, "I'm not okay," you can say, "I'm feeling overwhelmed because I need more clarity." Instead of, "I'm angry," you can say, "I need to feel respected in this conversation." These kinds of phrases use what we call emotional precision, and that's a skill that takes time to develop, both in your first language and in English. But once you have it, your communication becomes clearer, more honest, and more compassionate. And as we explore this theme today, I want to highlight a few common collocations related to needs. We often talk about meeting a need, fulfilling a need, identifying unmet needs, or addressing basic needs. In more formal or professional contexts, you might hear phrases like, "emotional needs are being overlooked," or "her psychological needs were not being acknowledged." Notice how the passive voice is often used here, especially when talking about things that have been ignored or forgotten, as in, "his need for support was completely dismissed." Using these patterns will help you sound more fluent and natural, especially when discussing sensitive or abstract topics. So here's a question to reflect on as we wrap up this section. What's one need in your life right now that's quietly asking for attention? Not shouting, not demanding, just quietly waiting for you to notice. Maybe it's the need for rest. Maybe it's the need for honest conversation. Maybe it's the need to feel more secure, more accepted, more seen. Whatever it is, give yourself a moment to name it. Because once something is named, it can be understood. And once it's understood, it can be met. Wishes. What you hope for. Let's take a moment to shift our focus from what we need to survive to what we wish for in order to feel truly alive. If needs are the ground beneath your feet, then wishes are the sky above your head. They represent the part of you that imagines, dreams, and looks forward. Unlike needs, wishes aren't essential for survival, but they are essential for meaning. They carry hope. They give you direction. They connect you with possibility. When we talk about wishes in English, we often use phrases like, "I wish I could," or "if only I had." These are forms of the subjunctive mood. structures that allow us to express things that are not true, at least not yet. For example, I wish I spoke Italian fluently. Or, I wish I had taken more risks in my 20s. These aren't statements of fact. They're expressions of longing, and longing is a deeply human emotion. It shows that something inside you is reaching for something just out of reach. Personally, I remember a time, several years ago, when I found myself stuck in a routine that felt safe, but not inspiring. Every day looked more or less the same. Work, commute, obligations. Nothing was wrong exactly, but nothing felt exciting either. And I started to notice a quiet, recurring thought. I wish I could work on something more meaningful. I wish I could build something of my own. That wish wasn't loud. It didn't demand immediate action, but it kept returning, like a song playing softly in the background. And eventually, that wish led me to take small, intentional steps. It didn't happen overnight, but it started with imagining a different future. And that's the power of wishing. It gives you a place to start. Of course, not every wish becomes a reality, and that's where the tension lies. Wishing is often entangled with fantasy. You might wish to live by the ocean, to travel the world, to be famous, to go back in time and undo a mistake. Some of these wishes might be realistic, others might not. But just because a wish isn't practical doesn't mean it's pointless. Even the most unrealistic wish tells you something about your values. It reflects what you find beautiful, meaningful, or missing. Think about it. If someone says, "I wish I had more time," what they're really expressing is a longing for balance, for space, maybe even for peace. If someone says, "I wish I could speak freely at work," they're touching on the desire for safety or authenticity. Every wish has a story behind it, even the small ones. I wish I could sleep in tomorrow. I wish I were more confident. I wish I hadn't said that. These are not just casual statements. They're quiet messages from the inner self. And that's where conditional thinking often enters the picture. You may find yourself saying things like, "If I had more money, I'd quit my job." Or, "If I lived somewhere else, I'd be happier." These thoughts can be motivating, but they can also become traps. Because if your dreams are always dependent on something external, a perfect moment, a perfect condition, then you risk waiting forever. There's a fine line between envisioning a better life and postponing the life you already have. Still, I think we all carry a collection of wishes inside us. Some are bold, some are quiet, some are left over from childhood. And not all of them need to come true in order to serve a purpose. Just the act of imagining something different or better can be energizing. It reminds you that change is possible, that you are not stuck, that maybe, just maybe, the life you want is closer than it seems, but only if you're willing to listen to your own yearning. From a language point of view, expressing wishes is a beautiful area of emotional fluency. You're not just learning grammar rules, you're learning how to share your deepest hopes, regrets, and visions. The phrase, "I wish I had," is often used to reflect on the past, a kind of emotional storytelling, while "I wish I could," or "I wish I were," points to something you want, but don't currently have. These structures are useful, not just in conversation, but in journaling, coaching, even poetry. And as you expand your vocabulary, try reaching for more expressive words. Instead of just want, try long for, yearn for, dream of, envision. These words add color, texture, and depth to your speech. So here's something to reflect on. What's one wish you've been carrying quietly, maybe for years, but haven't fully acknowledged? Maybe it's a lifestyle change, a relationship shift, a creative pursuit. Maybe it's the wish to forgive someone, or even to forgive yourself. Whatever it is, give yourself permission to imagine it. Not to plan it, not to analyze it, just to sit with it, to allow yourself to want it without shame. Because wishing is not weakness. It's a form of self-recognition. It's how we begin to tell ourselves the truth about what we care about, even if we're not ready to act on it yet. Expectations, the invisible script. Let's talk about something most of us carry with us, whether we realize it or not. I'm talking about expectations. Expectations are like an invisible script, quietly running in the background of our lives, shaping how we think, how we behave, how we judge others, and most importantly, how we judge ourselves. Unlike needs or wishes, expectations often feel like they're just there. We rarely stop to question where they came from, or whether they still serve us. But they do shape our reality, sometimes in helpful ways, and sometimes in ways that quietly sabotage our well-being. An expectation is, at its core, a belief about how things should be, how people should act, how life should unfold, how you should feel by a certain age. And this word, should, is really at the center of what we're exploring here. It's subtle, but powerful. We say things like, I should be more productive, he should have known better, or, by now, I should have figured it out. These statements sound neutral, even reasonable, but they carry a kind of invisible pressure, a constant feeling that something isn't quite enough. Now, many of these expectations are not ones we consciously created. They're internalized over time, shaped by culture, family, education, religion, media. You might have grown up hearing things like, success means financial security, or real men don't cry, or you must always put others first. Maybe nobody ever said these things out loud, but they were there, between the lines, and over time, they become part of the inner script you try to follow. For example, a listener once told me, I was raised to believe that if I wasn't constantly achieving something, I was wasting my potential. That belief wasn't something she chose. It was passed down, almost like a family heirloom. But as an adult, it began to feel heavy, exhausting, even harmful. She constantly felt like she was falling short, no matter how hard she worked. And that's what expectations can do. They can create a gap between who we are and who we think we're supposed to be. A gap that's hard to close. In professional life, expectations can be even more intense. You're expected to be efficient, ambitious, emotionally intelligent, collaborative, independent, all at the same time. And depending on your background or industry, there may also be unspoken rules about how you should speak, dress, react, or perform. If you don't fit that model, you might start to question your own value, even if you're doing your job well. And when those expectations are unrealistic or in conflict with your personal values, that's when stress, anxiety, and self-doubt creep in. There's also the issue of external expectations versus internal ones. Sometimes, it's not even about what others demand from us. It's about what we expect from ourselves. I should be better by now. I should never make mistakes. I should always be in control. These inner expectations are often the harshest. They come from a desire to live up to some ideal, and when we don't, we feel guilty, ashamed, or unworthy. We compare ourselves to people online, to our younger selves, to imagined versions of who we think we should have become. And very often, we don't even stop to ask, is this expectation fair? Is it realistic? Is it even mine? Linguistically, expectations often appear through modals of obligation, Words like should, must, have to, ought to. For example, you must be polite. I should exercise more. Or, we're supposed to finish this by Friday. These phrases are common in both formal and informal English, and they often reflect an underlying rule or social norm. But here's the thing, just because something is commonly expected doesn't mean it's right for everyone. One person's success might be another person's burnout. We also use a lot of idiomatic expressions when talking about expectations. For instance, you might hear someone say they're trying to live up to their parents' standards, or that they fell short of their goals. These idioms express a gap, a distance between what was expected and what actually happened. And that gap often carries emotional weight, disappointment, frustration, even shame. And let's not forget how expectations affect relationships. We expect our friends to understand us, our partners to support us, our colleagues to cooperate. And when they don't, when reality doesn't match the story we had in our heads, conflict often follows. But in many cases, those expectations were never clearly communicated. They were assumed. And that's where the trouble starts. As the saying goes, unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments. Harsh, but often true. So what can we do with all of this? Well, the first step is to start noticing. Just notice when a sentence in your mind includes the word should. Ask yourself, where did that belief come from? Is it mine? Does it help me? Or hold me back? You don't need to throw away all your expectations. Some of them are healthy. They guide your behavior, help you set goals, and push you to grow. But many of them, especially the inherited unconscious ones, might be quietly running your life without your permission. Here's something to reflect on as we move forward. What's one expectation you're currently carrying that feels more like a burden than a motivation? And if you could rewrite that part of the script, what would you choose instead? Internal dialogue. Listening to your inner voice. So far in this episode, we've explored needs, wishes, and expectations. These powerful inner forces that shape our experience. But now, let's turn inward in an even more personal way, to something most of us experience every day, often without even noticing, our internal dialogue. That quiet, or sometimes very loud, voice in your head. The one that comments, judges, questions, criticizes, worries, replays the past, or imagines the future. In simple terms, it's how you talk to yourself. And how you speak to yourself matters, far more than many people realize. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you really listened to your inner voice? Not just what it was saying, but how it was saying it. Was it kind? Was it patient? Or was it frustrated, harsh, dismissive? Our internal dialogue plays a huge role in shaping our emotions, decisions, and even our relationships. And yet, most of it happens automatically. We don't always stop to ask, why am I speaking to myself this way? Where did this voice even come from? The truth is, your internal dialogue is heavily influenced by your past, especially the messages you absorbed during your formative years. Maybe you grew up hearing phrases like, don't be lazy, or that's not good enough, or you're too sensitive. Even if nobody says those things to you now, they might still live in your mind, repeated in your own voice. These internalized messages often become what psychologists call limiting beliefs, ideas you've accepted as truth, even if they're holding you back. Beliefs like, I'll never be confident, I'm not creative, or people like me don't succeed. Now, limiting beliefs aren't always obvious. Sometimes they hide inside your thoughts as facts, even though they're not, and they often appear in moments of stress or doubt. Imagine you're preparing for an interview, and a voice in your head says, "Don't mess this up. You always freeze when you're nervous." That may sound like a warning, but really, it's fear, disguised as logic. Or maybe you've thought, "I'm just not the kind of person who can take risks," when in reality, that's just a story you've told yourself, a protective narrative built from past experiences. And this brings us to the difference between reactive and reflective inner responses. A reactive response happens automatically. It's quick, emotional, and often critical. It says things like, "Why did I say that? I'm so stupid," or "This always happens. I'm such a failure." In contrast, a reflective response is slower, more conscious, and more compassionate. It might sound like, "I didn't handle that perfectly, but I'm learning," or "That was uncomfortable, but it doesn't define me." The difference isn't just in the language, it's in the emotional impact. One response creates shame, the other builds resilience. So, how do we begin shifting from reactive to reflective? First, we have to notice. Pay attention to the tone of your inner voice. Is it supportive or critical? Does it sound like someone you trust or someone you'd rather avoid? One powerful exercise is to ask yourself, if I spoke to a friend the way I speak to myself, how would they feel? That question alone can reveal a lot. Because the truth is, many of us are far more compassionate toward others than we are toward ourselves. Let's take a moment to reflect on some of the words that often appear in internal dialogue. Words like should, always, never, enough. I should be further along. I never get it right. This isn't good enough. These are emotionally loaded words, and they often don't reflect reality. They reflect fear. In contrast, when we begin to replace those patterns with more nurturing language, things begin to shift. Words like trying, growing, learning, processing. You might say, "I'm learning to handle situations like this better," instead of, "I always screw this up." That tiny shift in language can change your emotional state and your outcomes. From a language perspective, internal dialogue is rich territory for building fluency, especially when it comes to emotive vocabulary. Try describing your inner voice with words like harsh, judgmental, cold, anxious, rigid, or on the other hand, encouraging, forgiving, kind, wise, curious. These adjectives can help you analyze not just what you're thinking, but the quality of your thinking. And embedded questions can help deepen that reflection. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" which often leads to shame, try, "What am I believing about myself right now?" Or, "What might I need in this moment?" Notice how different those questions feel. All of this, of course, takes practice. Learning to listen to your inner voice with awareness, and then slowly, gently adjusting it, is a long-term process. It's not about forcing yourself to be positive all the time. It's about creating space for a voice that is honest and compassionate. A voice that helps you grow, instead of keeping you stuck. So here's something I invite you to consider. What does your internal dialogue sound like in moments of stress? And how would it change if it came from a place of care instead of criticism? And maybe even more importantly, what kind of inner voice do you want to develop? Not just for yourself, but for the person you're becoming. Navigating misalignment. When they don't match. By now, you've probably started to notice that needs, wishes, and expectations don't always work in harmony. In fact, some of the most difficult moments in life, the moments that feel confusing, frustrating, or even painful, often come from a kind of misalignment between these three forces. And today, I want to talk about that. What it feels like when your needs, your dreams, and the expectations placed on you, by yourself or others, are out of sync. Let's imagine a scenario. Picture someone who's in a high-paying job, stable, respected, impressive on the outside. They've checked all the boxes. They've done what was expected. But something inside them feels restless, empty, or numb. They might think, I should be happy. I have everything people say you're supposed to want, but deep down, they're running on empty. Why? Because their emotional needs, maybe the need for creativity, autonomy, or purpose, are being ignored. Their wish might be to do something more fulfilling, something aligned with their values, but their expectation is that they should stay, because that's what responsible adults do, and so they're caught in the middle. This internal conflict is a classic example of cognitive dissonance, a psychological term that describes the mental discomfort we feel when our beliefs, desires, or behaviors contradict one another. It's that uncomfortable tension you experience when you say one thing but feel another, or when your actions go in one direction, but your heart pulls you in the opposite one. And it doesn't only happen in career decisions. Think about relationships. A person might need emotional safety, but they stay in a partnership that doesn't offer it, because they expect that love should be unconditional, or that they should stay for the kids, or because they wish things would magically improve. In this situation, the need is at odds with the hope, and the expectation complicates the decision. It's like trying to walk in three directions at once. Misalignment can also lead to burnout, especially when you ignore your real needs for too long. You might keep pushing yourself to meet deadlines, achieve goals, or take care of others, even though your body is asking for rest, or your mind is begging for a break. The expectation to keep going becomes louder than the internal voice saying, slow down. And even though the wish might be to create a more balanced life, the reality is that everything feels out of rhythm, because nothing has been recalibrated. What makes this even more complex is that our modern culture often encourages us to confuse wishes with expectations. We're told, explicitly or implicitly, that if we want something badly enough, we should achieve it, that our dreams should lead to success, that hard work must lead to happiness. But the truth is more complicated. Not all dreams are practical. Not all effort is rewarded in the way we hope. And when wishes are treated like promises rather than possibilities, disappointment becomes inevitable. So how can you recognize when your needs, wishes, and expectations are misaligned? One clue is emotional. Frustration, indecision, and guilt often signal that something is out of place. For example, if you constantly feel stuck, unable to move forward but also unwilling to stay where you are, that's a sign of internal conflict. Or if you keep asking yourself, why can't I be satisfied with what I have? It might mean that your outer life reflects expectations, but not your true needs or aspirations. Listen to the language you use in those moments. You might say things like, I know I should be grateful, but I'm not. Or, I want to leave, but I feel like I can't. Or even, I thought this would make me happy, but it doesn't. These kinds of sentences reveal contrast, and contrast often reveals truth. Although you may appear fine on the outside, something on the inside is not being nourished. Whereas others might see you as successful, you may feel unfulfilled. Even though your life looks stable, it might not feel aligned. This is where self-awareness becomes essential. When you feel this dissonance, try to slow down and reflect. Ask yourself questions like, what need is not being met here? What wish am I secretly holding on to? What expectation am I trying, maybe too hard, to live up to? The answers aren't always immediate, but even just asking the questions creates space for clarity. From a language point of view, These situations offer the perfect moment to practice contrastive expressions and phrasal verbs. Think about phrases like at odds with, caught between, push through, burn out, or settle for. These are common in everyday speech, but they also carry emotional nuance. For instance, I felt caught between what I wanted and what was expected of me. That's not just a grammatically correct sentence. It's a sentence full of meaning. And meaning is what makes language stick. So here's a final reflection for this section. Is there a part of your life right now where your needs, wishes, and expectations feel out of sync? And if so, what's one small step you could take to bring them closer together? It doesn't have to be a big decision. Even just naming the tension can be powerful, because once you see the pattern, you're no longer trapped in it. You can begin to write a new script, one that's more honest, more compassionate, and more aligned with who you really are. Reclaiming alignment, conscious intention, and self-kindness. After recognizing the misalignment between your needs, wishes, and expectations, the next natural step is to consider how to reclaim your sense of balance and authenticity. This is not about perfection or quick fixes. Rather, it's about making conscious choices to live more intentionally. Choices that reflect your true values, rather than simply responding to external pressures or automatic patterns. Reclaiming alignment begins with self-awareness. It means tuning in, really tuning in, to your internal dialogue, your bodily sensations, and your emotional responses. When was the last time you paused during a hectic day to check in with yourself? To ask, what do I need right now? What am I hoping for? What am I expecting from myself or others? Developing this habit of mindful reflection is the foundation for any meaningful change. It creates the space where transformation becomes possible. But self-awareness alone isn't enough. Once you begin to notice the gaps or tensions within, you'll need to practice setting boundaries. Boundaries can feel uncomfortable or even selfish at first, especially if you're used to prioritizing others or meeting expectations at your own expense. Yet boundaries are a vital form of self-kindness. They are how you say to yourself in the world, "This is what I need to thrive, and I'm committed to protecting that." It might mean learning to say no more often, or carving out time for rest and creativity, or asking for support when you need it. Each boundary you set is a step toward realigning your life with what truly matters. Small, intentional changes accumulate over time, and they can lead to profound shifts. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. Instead, focus on what feels manageable and meaningful. Maybe you'll decide to start journaling once a week to clarify your wishes. Or perhaps you'll commit to one evening free of work emails, allowing your mind to rest. These actions are more than routines. They are declarations of intention. They signal to your brain and heart that you're serious about reclaiming your agency. From a language perspective, this is a great moment to reflect on the power of empowering verbs. Verbs that encourage action and control over your experience. Words like reclaim, realign, reset, commit, embrace, and nurture carry a sense of agency and possibility. You might say, "I will reclaim my time," or "I'm working on realigning my priorities," or "I'm ready to reset my boundaries." Notice how these verbs focus not just on what happens, but on what you can do. They invite you to step into the role of an active creator of your life. Future forms also play an important role here. When you say, "I will choose to honor my needs," or "I'm going to practice self-kindness every day," you're not only planning for the future, you're also affirming your commitment in the present moment. This kind of language can help solidify your intentions and make your goals feel more tangible and achievable. And don't forget the power of gerunds and infinitives in expressing these processes. You might talk about learning to listen to myself, committing to setting boundaries, or choosing to prioritize rest. These verbal forms help express ongoing actions or decisions, highlighting that reclaiming alignment is a journey, not a one-time event. As you take these steps toward alignment, remember to practice self-kindness along the way. Change is rarely linear, and setbacks or doubts will almost certainly arise. When that happens, try to speak to yourself with the same compassion you would offer a dear friend. Instead of harsh judgments like, "I failed again," try, "I'm learning, and every effort counts." This nurturing approach to yourself fosters resilience and opens the door to deeper transformation. So here's a question for you to carry forward. What small intentional action can you take today, right now, to realign with your true needs, wishes, or expectations? It could be as simple as breathing deeply for a moment, writing down one boundary you want to set, or reminding yourself that your worth is not defined by what you produce. Whatever it is, remember that each step you take is an act of reclaiming your inner harmony, an act of kindness toward the person you are becoming. Living in alignment isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity, courage, and grace. It's about embracing your complexity, honoring your journey, and moving forward with intention and care. As we come to the close of this episode, I want to invite you to take a moment, maybe even a deep breath, and simply sit with what we've explored together today. Understanding your needs, wishes, and expectations isn't a quick or easy task. It's a journey that calls for patience, curiosity, and, above all, kindness toward yourself. So, before we part ways, let's pause and reflect gently on the ideas we've discussed. You might want to grab a journal, or simply hold the questions in your mind. When was the last time you really checked in with yourself? Not just in passing, but with real attention to your inner dialogue? What needs have been quietly waiting for your recognition? Which wishes have been pushing at the edges of your consciousness, perhaps too fragile or too bold to express aloud? And what expectations, whether from family, society, or yourself, have you been trying to live up to, even when they felt heavy or limiting? It's normal if you don't have all the answers right now. Sometimes, just asking the questions can be the beginning of transformation. You might find it helpful to revisit this episode, maybe even listen again slowly, letting the words sink in. Language, after all, is a powerful tool for unlocking understanding, both of the world and of ourselves. The phrases and vocabulary we've touched on today, words like reclaim, realign, limiting beliefs, caught in the middle, they're more than just vocabulary. They're keys to expressing the complex landscape of your inner life. As you reflect, consider talking with someone you trust, a friend, a mentor, or a fellow learner. Conversations about these topics can deepen insight, offer new perspectives, and remind you that you're not alone in facing these universal challenges. After all, the tension between needs, wishes, and expectations is something every person navigates in their own way. Before we finish, I want to leave you with a gentle challenge. Over the next week, try to observe your own internal dialogue, that constant stream of thoughts and feelings running through your mind. Notice when your needs are being met, when your wishes ignite your imagination, and when expectations feel like a heavy script you're trying to follow. And when you notice these moments, practice responding with kindness and curiosity rather than judgment. Ask yourself, what is this trying to tell me? Or, how can I honor this part of myself today? Remember, this is not about changing everything overnight. It's about taking small, intentional steps to live more authentically. Steps that help you reconnect with what truly matters. In doing so, You reclaim not only your personal power, but also your capacity for resilience and transformation. Thank you for tuning in to Code Your English. I hope this episode has sparked some meaningful reflections and given you language tools to articulate your own journey with greater confidence. If you found this helpful, please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit or leaving a comment to share your thoughts. Your voice and your experiences matter deeply. Until next time, keep listening to your inner voice, keep asking questions, and above all, keep being kind to yourself. Because understanding your needs, wishes, and expectations is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. And that gift keeps growing as long as you nurture it. Take care, and see you soon.